I just want to, share some of the education that I've gotten myself about what traditional Native American foods are, and what they can be moving forward, and just all the different flavors that are out there for people to try. I just want a deeper understanding of everything that's all around us and all the history that's involved with everything. Just trying some new flavors and, putting some thought into what traditional foods are, and maybe down the road they'll be like, oh, that's indigenous, that's traditional. I grew up on Pine Ridge, so I'm Lakota, so I'm Oglala. But out here, since I'm in this region, I wanted to focus only on Dakota and Ojibwe food. So that's what we're doing right now. There aren't a lot of Native American restaurants out there, are there? Yeah, and there's no reason for that, so we want to try to change that. Today we're going to have duck. Have you guys ever had duck before?
Yeah.
Yeah? Was it good?
Yeah.
There's a lot of food that comes from this area. There's a lot of food. So it's not only what's growing wild in the forests and around the lakes and the animals. People also used to farm a lot in this area. So they had big farms before European people came out here. So they were growing lots of different kinds of corn, lots of different kinds of beans. Anything from like green beans, black beans, white beans, red beans, they all had different names. They also grew lots of different kinds of squash, and it could be anything from like zucchini all the way to pumpkins. So lots of different vegetables are being grown out here too. And all of this food is really healthy for all of us, and it's easy to find. I mean, you guys know what this is, right?
Wild rice.
Wild rice. You guys know what these are? These are pumpkin seeds. You know what these ones are? These are cranberries. This is maple syrup. This herb is sage. Yeah. And then I know she told you what these guys are. These guys are called sunchokes. And these guys grow all over, even around here. You can see them like along the interstates and stuff growing all the time. And it's just the roots. And then these guys are dandelion greens. So you see these guys in everybody's yard all the time. And actually these ones officially came from Europe, I'm pretty sure. A long time ago though. And they've, probably like in the 1500s basically. But they're all over the place, and it's vegetables. If you guys like salads, it's free. But I wouldn't go pick them out on a lawn. Maybe if you're in the forest, that's different, but maybe not on your neighbor's lawn. And these are just a bunch of fresh mixed greens. These are baby greens. They're called microgreens. And I just like to use lots of fresh stuff. The cranberries, right? I've got a little bit of water cooking, and I'm just going to put these in here. And I'm just going to let them cook. And the same thing with the wild rice. I'm going to cook some of this off. I'm not even really going to do much with this duck. I'm just going to put a little bit of salt on it, okay? And a long time ago, people used to use salt quite a bit also, because you can get salts from like certain plants, certain areas by the rivers. There's mines. A long time ago also people used to trade a lot, so all the neighboring tribes would trade with other neighboring tribes, and all these goods would come through the circles, and sometimes they'd meet up in a big area and do a big trade. So there'd be a big market for a couple times a year, and they would just trade a whole bunch of stuff. So with this one I'm just going to put in the pan and let it cook for just a little bit. These sunchokes, I'm going to let them slice them up into real thin things. This thing is called a mandolin. And it's really sharp because it's got a razor blade on it. So I'm just going to cut some really thin slices on this real quick. Sunchokes, if you ever see them on the road, they look like little sunflowers because they grow about this big, and there'll be a whole cluster of them, but they look like little tiny sunflowers. But underneath them are these cool roots. They're kind of like a potato or a turnip or something like that a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of maple syrup to both of these. Because what we're going to do is, after I get all this food prepared for you guys, I'm going to make a really pretty plate, and then I'm going to let each one of you guys make a plate too, okay? And then we'll take a look at everybody's plates, and then everybody get to try it and see what they think. A lot of the plants that grow in the wild, sometimes they are a little bit bitter, but it's important to know those flavors because those are flavors that were around for a long time. We got so used to eating way too much sugar, and it's really bad for everybody, unfortunately. Because you can't even go to like the corner store or gas station and try to find anything that doesn't have like massive amounts of sugar in it. I've learned a lot of different kinds of foods Spanish food, Italian food, Japanese food, German food. But then I also just realized like why weren't there any Native American restaurants or cookbooks and nobody was messing with Native American food. And if it was Native American food, they'd just say fry bread, but that couldn't be the answer for everything, you know, so I wanted to learn a lot more. Plain pumpkin seeds, you can buy them at most stores have them. The Mexicans call them pepitas, and you see them. I'm not even using any oil, I'm just going to let them toast up. Have you guys all tried sage before? A little bit? No? You guys have smelled it though, and people burn sage, right? Yeah, the burn sage is a little bit different. This one's more just used for cooking. So I want to toast these seeds just so they get a little bit of color on them. It's one of the most important things for the way people were processing foods a long time ago was people were getting ready for the winter, because she's right, there weren't a lot of things growing in the winter because it's cold and dry. It's not like 40 degrees in January normally, you know. Right? But it would start with maple season. People would get all the maple, and then springtime the snow starts to melt, springtime comes around. And then the first bits of spring vegetables would come up. So you'd see dandelions, you'd see wild onions, you'd see the baby ferns as they're coming up, and all those things are edible. And then people are getting their gardens and farms ready, everything they're going to plant. And then by the time things start to grow in the farms, the berries start to come around pretty quickly, so you start to see all sorts of berries in the forest. And berry seasons vary so much, there's all sorts of different kinds of berries. But the biggest trick was to make sure that people were drying. I'm putting just a little bit of salt on these. That people were really careful about how they preserve foods because you needed to save them, so you had a lot of food for the winter. So people would dry a lot of their foods out, usually sun drying and sometimes smoking. And that way the food would last a long time because there weren't any refrigerators a long time ago, right? So, and then it was really important. And then a lot of times people would make a big hole in the ground and basically put all their food in the ground just because it would keep easier. That's like building a cellar, basically. Just making big soups. And sometimes they would just do it where they put a bunch of stuff in either a pot or sometimes they make stomach bags into a soup container, basically. And they just take like really, really hot rocks. They'd get so hot they would glow. And they just take these hot glowing rocks and drop them right in the water, and it would cook the soup all up. So, and then another way would be burying foods, because they would make a big fire, dig a hole, make a big fire, and get these hot rocks really, really hot again in the fire. And then they would, layer it with some earth, put a bunch of food on, layer it again, and let big meats and things, slow cook in the ground to make these earth ovens. And also, baking things in pottery was an old style too, so they could wrap small animals basically all in pottery and just put them in the fire and let them cook for a long time, and then crack it open and pull it all apart. So there was a bunch of really cool old styles of cooking, but the most useful way was sun drying and smoking things. Because have you guys ever had smoked fish or smoked meats before? Probably, kind of like beef jerky and stuff like that. That was pretty much a style of meats that people had for a long time because it was important to preserve your meats right away, so that was the easiest way to do it. So I think it's really fun to let the kids play, especially at the plating part, because I think putting a little bit of artistry in everything you do is always important too. And just showing how easy the foods are to make individually and how healthy they are when you do it that way also. For my plate, I'm going to do a little bit of cranberry sauce first. A little bit of wild rice, a little bit of duck, a little bit of sage, pumpkin seeds, some microgreens. What do you guys think? And just showcase that there's really cool Native American food out there. What's your favorite parts of it so far? The sauce? Thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed the class a little bit.
Yeah.
It was kind of fun to make the plates, wasn't it? Find me at www.siou-chef.com. That's SIOUX. I have lots of information on the website. You can also find me on all the social media like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that too.